Back now to Oregon in the bizarre suicide turned homicide case. This is for defendant Jerod Norman. Authorities initially believed that Mariah King died by suicide last summer. But the case has taken a surprising turn when the medical examiner revealed that an unspent bullet was found inside King. Let's go back into that courtroom. We are going to pick it up with the prosecution's final statements.
Thank you, Your Honor. We know that Mariah King was alive at about 9:20 when, or 9:30 when Officer McPherson went to the home to do a welfare check. He went to do a welfare check based on a call from her mom because of concerns for domestic violence. Information was that Mariah King had gone to Going Green and her mom came to Going Green and saw and had contact with her and then makes the welfare check to Sweet Home PD. So at 9:30, Officer McPherson is there. He speaks to Miss King, doesn't note any injuries to her forehead, but does indicate there was a concern for scratches on her neck. At 10:48 is when the 911 call comes in. You have a copy of that in evidence, and that's about an hour and 18 minutes after. So at 9:30, 9:35, Miss King was alive. There were no injuries to her at that point in time, except for what Mom had reported on her neck. EMTs arrive and officers arrive about the same time. When the EMTs arrive and officers have their kind of first contact with the EMTs, Officer Barretto's video shows that EMTs are needing a flashlight to see into the shop. So there was no light on in the shop, which should be an important factor for the court to consider, because that shop, it being dark, for Mariah King to hang herself, she would have had to go shut off the lights and walk over and get the noose, put it around her, and do whatever she needed to do to hang herself. Keep in mind that the rope is nicely coiled underneath her head when the lights are on in the office, and there's being photos taken. The court has a photo of that. There's information in the court file that the defendant's dad untied a knot while Mr. Norman was holding her up, and tied a knot. Not the noose, didn't take the noose off of her. He untied a knot. That is absolutely impossible. Would not have been able to do that. The noose being around her neck, he could not have fed that through the knot. And because of the very end of the rope is underneath that huge coil of rope, there's no way possible, unless they took the time to rewind it and recoil it before they laid her down to try to do any kind of resuscitation on Mariah King, like they said that they were doing. Impossible. Mr. Norman's first conversation is when he was told about what he found, was when the EMTs told him she could not be revived. He indicated to the EMTs he found her on the floor, butt on the ground, and hands reaching the floor. He indicated that she had locked herself in the shed. She may have locked herself in the shed, but he had a key to the shed. He was the only one who had a key to the shed, and he actually was able to go and unlock the shed to check on her. He was the only one with the key. So her locking herself in the shed makes no sense when he's the one who has a key to the shed, and he could always go and unlock it. You can tell that her pants were, the bullet in the vagina is the biggest red flag in this whole case. It's not even in her vagina anymore. It was pushed through her vaginal wall, and it was found floating within her abdominal cavity. Dr. Hurst even indicated in his grand jury testimony that it would take a great deal of force and it would cause a great deal of pain for anybody to do that to themselves. Now, whether it's perimortem or postmortem, in order to, for a female to do this to herself, You have to think about this. She would have to exert an extreme amount of pressure to push it through her vaginal wall. And while she's in a great deal of pain, she would have to walk herself over, make sure she's hanging herself, like almost instantly, for that to even make any sense. Any sense. Not only that, she doesn't have, she has some other suspicious marks, as Dr. Hurst indicated. She has these knots on her head and her forehead that were not visible to Officer McPherson. Mom didn't indicate in the call for a welfare check about those. She only indicated there were scratches on her neck. Kenneth Rosgan, his duties are defined under ORS 146-085 to 146-107. He indicated to the court that there was not a bite in the rope, which means there was nothing to stop the rope. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that you need to have something that'll stop that rope so you don't end up on your butt and your hands on the ground so that you are strangling yourself. That's just a common sense kind of thing. He also testified there was no way to keep somebody suspended. He also indicated that it was not consistent with a hanging suicide based on his training and experience in the many suicides that he has attended. Multiple bruises, and he also testified that the lividity goes to the lowest points, fingers, toes, and hanging. He found it on her back. His job is to respond to death scenes and examine the body, examine the scenes for any potential evidence that would help in determining cause and manner of death. Yes, he cannot certify cause and manner, which means he can't put it on a death certificate. He can't do a death certificate, but he can investigate and come up with his own determinations to give to the ME about the cause and manner of death. That is his job. The injury to the back of her head was not noticed when he did his initial examination. He didn't find any blood on the ground, and he didn't have any blood on his gloves as he testified. There is some, Mr. Rosgan and Detective Potter both indicated that they did have a conference with Dr. Hurst. And Dr. Hurst did indicate to them that he believed it was post-mortem. Now he's saying peri-mortem in his final report, well, in his grand jury testimony. So there is that potential. Detective Potter interviewed and reviewed other officer reports. And there was at least a couple days before this, she was afraid of the defendant. She had been hiding underneath the children's bed because she was afraid. She had made that comment to Dawn Cunningham. While she was at Going Green earlier on that day, she told Jeanette Taylor that things had gotten physical between the two of them. McPherson responded to the welfare check, and it was for domestic violence, not because she was suicidal. And McPherson testified today that he had not responded to a call at that residence for anything but a dispute between neighbors. So there had not, at least with McPherson's knowledge, any kind of a suicide attempt prior to that. And keep in mind that the manner of death is undetermined. Dr. Hurst didn't say it was suicide, and he did not say it was homicide. But he most definitely did not say it was suicide. He did say that there were concerning features, the petechiae of the conjunctiva, face laceration, and the face laceration to the scalp, and the intact rifle cartridge inserted through the vaginal mucosa. He said at grand jury that the petechiae is more common in cases of strangulation and not hanging suicide. I would ask that the court find that we have shown that the presumption is strong and deny bail for the defendant.
Thank you, Judge. Several of the things that the state told you in their closing argument today, I just don't understand. And so I'm not going to try to refute those things. Instead, I'm going to stick with the plan and tell you the things that we think are important for this bail hearing. But it does bother me that the state says things like it's not possible to untie a knot in a rope in a certain way, or that it's not possible to lock the door to the shed from the inside because Mr. Norman has a key. Those things just don't make sense, and I don't know why those are presented to you in that fashion. The state's right about the statute, though. 135-240 says bail's to be denied unless the proof is evident or the presumption is strong that the defendant is guilty. And these are findings which are hard, if not impossible, to make on the record that you have in this case.
Listening to defense counsel make his arguments there during this bail hearing, why don't we bring in trial attorney Tamika Rabowski to talk about and review what we just listened to. We've been playing, Tamika, this bond hearing from Oregon. We listened to the prosecutor. Now defense is getting up there saying, I don't understand a lot of the things that she was saying, not important, not relevant here. What's your take on this?
Well, I kind of agree with the first thing that he said in terms of the absolutes that the prosecutor was speaking in terms of. I think you have to be very mindful of speaking absolutes, because if that's what you're counting on, that it is absolutely true, and something comes up, something is demonstrated, an expert testifies to something that is contrary to that, then that kind of knocks your case, kind of knocks your credibility in bringing your case. As far as the litany of items that she went through as making this just clad iron, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Initially, I could not see why they thought this was so strong, but as she went through, there are some things they're going to have to flesh out, like the turmoil in their relationship, and then the force that it took to get the bullet into the vaginal wall. So I think there are some things there.
Yeah, definitely still a lot of questions here in this one. Tamika, thank you so much for your excellent insight. Appreciate you joining us this hour. And coming up, we're going to have more of that bond hearing for Jerod Norman. Plus, you can see that verdict clock. Jury still deliberating in the Brian Walsh murder trial. Almost 2 hours and 30 minutes. We'll be back. And welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Kelly Craft. Thanks for being with us today on this Friday. And we begin this hour in Massachusetts, where deliberations remain underway in the disappearance of Anna Walsh murder trial. Prosecutors say that Brian Walsh murdered his wife after he discovered she was having an affair, then dismembered her body and disposed of it. Walsh's defense team is not denying that he got rid of the body, but he says that Brian Walsh did not kill her and that she died from something called sudden unexplained death. You can see the verdict clock up there, 2 hours and 33 minutes. We will take you inside that courtroom if there is a verdict or even if the jury has a question there. But for now, let's head back to Oregon. This is for the Unspent Bullet Murder Case. Jerod Norman, he is accused of killing his girlfriend, her name Mariah King. Her death was initially ruled a suicide by hanging. But a year later, the case took a dramatic twist when the medical examiner revealed that there was an unspent bullet inside her. Let's go back inside that courtroom now. More of that unaired bond hearing. Right now, the defense is giving final remarks ahead of the judge's ruling.
As we described earlier, this case presents the court with a tragic suicide that has turned into a homicide for invalid and unworthy reasons. On July 18, Mariah King was at the Going Green dispensary, and she was reported by an employee named Jeanette Taylor as being intoxicated and paranoid. She had some scratch marks on her neck. Mariah King spoke to that employee about self-harm, and in fact explained those scratches as a suicide attempt. She talked to her mother about them when her mother arrived and was heard saying, "I tried to stop myself from breathing." Jeanette Taylor said that Mariah King was a mess when she talked about this self-harm. She was off the chain, she was erratic. These things were confirmed by Detective Potter when he interviewed Jeanette Taylor. Mariah King was extremely restless, extremely distressed, in tears, and borderline hyperventilating. During that conversation, Mariah King's mother, Kim Lapham, said she was done with Mariah King. She said, "Don't call me again," to Jeanette Taylor, "call the cops." But Kim Lapham did eventually call the cops herself later to initiate this welfare check. And we know that Mariah King refused that welfare check and told Officer McPherson to go away. She ended up, before leaving Going Green, talking to her mother and then leaving the store on foot. Later that same day, Officer McPherson shows up to Mariah King's address for that welfare check. She was living there with her partner, Jerod Norman. McPherson saw several people there. Jerod Norman was there, his father, David Norman, 2 children, Barrett and Dylan, and Mariah King. Mariah King was in the workshop next to the house. She told Officer McPherson to go away twice. She said she was fine, but she was not fine. She was screaming, she was possibly angry, and she seemed disturbed and erratic. Jerod Norman was normal when McPherson arrived. Mr. Norman was out in the front working on something, as he told us today, with one of the 2 boys. He did not yell at anyone or use foul language. After the brief conversation with Mariah King, his head was hung low and he seemed disappointed. Mariah King did not leave that workshop after Officer McPherson drove away. The shop was locked with her inside alone. The kids were around. Jerod Norman and David Norman were both around, and one or the both of them was preparing dinner by grilling outdoors. After over an hour, Jerod Norman got a key and unlocked the shop and went in. He found Mariah King suspended or partially suspended with a rope around her neck. He called for help, and his father, David Norman, came in. Mr. Norman was distraught after making this discovery. That was testified to by Officer Barreto. He indicated that Mr. Norman was screaming and crying and wailing at different times. When Officer McPherson himself returned to the house, he said Mr. Norman was distraught, on his knees and crying. This is conduct and behavior that is consistent with how a person would act under the circumstances as Jerod Norman described them. He did not make any incriminating statements at all. Officer Barreto and the video of Jerod Norman, which the court has reviewed, inform us that he was acting like a person whose partner just died, not some kind of cold-blooded killer. Detective Potter laid a foundation for the 911 call, which the court has been able to review. He confirmed that David Norman and Jerod Norman were both asking for help, and they wanted immediate aid. And you can hear Mr. Norman saying things like, "Please don't. Breathe, baby, please. I love you. I love you." Detective Potter also confirmed that Mr. Norman was distraught, saying things like, "Look at me, baby, come back." These are the kinds of things that make sense under these circumstances, and they're not weird. They would be expected. And of course, a lack of concern by Mr. Norman would be duly noted by law enforcement, because that would help establish a strong presumption or evident proof. But that's not established by this evidence. Detective Potter is the lead detective in this case. He never went into the workshop at all. He did interview Mr. Norman, and Mr. Norman told him a lot of things which you have heard about. These were things which were not incriminating, and they all turned out to be true. He ended up talking about the timeline leading up to the incident. People slept on a trampoline. People were there for a barbecue dinner. Mr. Norman told Detective Potter that Mariah King had been drinking. This was confirmed by toxicology reports. Mr. Norman told Detective Potter that there was an argument on July the 18th between Mariah King and her brother, Jasper Lapham. Detective Potter confirmed this family friction was real, as Mr. Norman described. In fact, that argument sort of ended with Mr. Norman and Jasper Lapham agreeing to speak on the following Monday, and this was corroborated by some text message evidence. If he was staging a suicide, if he committed homicide and wanted to make it look like a suicide, a fake hanging, why on earth would he leave a bullet inside the person's vagina? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense compared with the goal that somebody would have of trying to make this look like a hanging. When Detective Potter asked Mr. Norman about that cartridge, what did Mr. Norman say? He said, "That must be from my rifle," which is not the kind of thing a person would say if they were trying to avoid self-incrimination. And he said, like she ate it? Like he didn't even understand what was being discussed, which reveals that he didn't understand this weird fact any more than the rest of us. There's a strong presumption the defendant is not guilty, and that comes from Mariah King's troubled history. It comes from her previous suicidality. It comes from her previous instances of self-harm, which were observed up until the day she died. There's a lack of any incriminating statements or behavior from Mr. Norman. He said things which were consistent with the tragedy of his partner's suicide. His actions were not consistent with those of a killer. There's no proof, Judge, that Mr. Norman inserted that bullet where it ended up. And there's no way, based on what we've heard so far, to know whether the bullet was inserted before or after her death. The answers to those questions can shed some light on how this could have happened. And they don't point to a homicide. And that's why we think, yes, the bullet is important. The bullet is a red flag.
All right, I'm going to set bail at $2 million. I'm doing that because that's consistent with what we've seen in Lincoln County cases. I don't know what the culture is in other counties, in Multnomah or Eugene. I just know that in Lincoln County, for a murder case, $1 million is usually the starting point. It can be less depending on the circumstances. There are no rules of thumb with respect to security, nor should they be. Every situation is different. However, in this case, I heard from some victims, and the question is, even though it was unsworn, and that's the nature of a release hearing, the question is, did I believe what they told me about the things that he said and the threats that he made? I believe them, so I'm going to set the bail at $2 million.
Okay, we just heard the judge's decision in that case. Let's go ahead and bring in our guest for this hour. Joining us, trial attorney Jamie White. Jamie, thank you for being with us today. Okay, let's talk about what we just heard. We heard the judge's decision. Defense counsel making some pretty strong arguments there at the end, saying, you know, there's really a strong presumption here that he didn't do anything here, that this was a suicide like it was ruled initially.
Yeah, I mean, those are very good points that were brought up by the defense and yourself. You know, the problem becomes at the stage that we are now, few separate things distinctly. And, you know, one of those things is whether or not someone is in immediate harm to the community, which is a very valid concern here, their likelihood to reappear, and, you know, any other sort of extrajudicial things that may be involved. But the facts of the case and how it happened and why it happened, there's a time and a place for that, and this hearing is not it. That day is coming, but for now, the court's only real concern is, should he stay in jail or should he be allowed to relieve under some set of circumstances? So on its face, the judge's initial ruling appears to me to be reasonable, but it does bring extraordinary questions about what we're going to hear in the next phases of this hearing.
Yeah, the next phases are going to be good to watch. Jamie, thank you so much.